Welcome into the Tuesday meeting of our internship cohort. We're super excited to have Tim Kubiak, our guest speaker today. Tim is a sales professional, a sales coach, a global sales leader. He's an entrepreneur, and he's also a public speaker. The reason for inviting Tim today is because he is an expert on sales, but also some of the components of sales, which are, we mentioned in previous meetings, call anxiety or call reluctance and approach anxiety. There are a lot of people, some of them in our industry, especially when you first get your start, where you're reluctant or anxious about making overtures towards sources, people in the public, and officials to gather information, have them sign up for interviews and or agree to participate in stories. And so Tim is an expert on helping to train sales professionals to overcome that call reluctance and approach anxiety. And so we're super excited that Tim has agreed to be with us this morning and to share his expertise in those fields, specifically related to the work that you all are training right now in school to undertake when you graduate. So Tim, welcome in this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, and everyone, thanks for listening. And what I want to do is I have slides, of course, because guys like me have to have slides. But what I want to do is actually make it interactive and tailor it more to where you're struggling and what you want to do. So if I can start, what's the 3 challenges you guys have when it comes to reaching out to people and making contacts?
Feel free to unmute and give an example.
I think for me, the biggest thing that prevents me or holds me back from calling is, what if I have a lack of experience and they're not even gonna take the time with me? Does that make sense? That's my one.
Okay. Right. And we may dive a little more into that, Grace, but awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
Go ahead, Ryan.
For me, I technically have no problem talking to people. I can't stop talking to people actually, but my issue comes along the lines of being a student journalist and a lot of people knowing that work might not be published in the same way a network would. And I always feel like they're less inclined to give you the opportunity to tell your story because they know it's not going to be published in the same way. So I've always been more concerned about, I guess, using my campus media as my background because I feel like people are going to treat you differently.
Okay. That's a good one. Okay. Do we have any others out there?
I see no one else raising their hand, but I have had one recently with a new employee here at our station where she was, her first overture toward a public official, they were gruff toward her. And so she was reluctant to then return and engage in interaction and conversation with that individual because that first conversation wasn't super nice and reaffirming.
Okay. Yeah. So ironically, that's one of the things salespeople fear the most and run into. So. All right. And a couple other things I just want to ask, so I understand a little bit more about what's a good outcome. Is it them saying yes to an interview? Is it them building a relationship with you that you can go back to time and again? What's a good outcome from an outreach?
I guess having a potential follow-up set of information about what's going on, or at least some sort of communication that seems positive, or just, like I said, the lead to almost a next step sort of deal.
Okay. Lead to next steps. Fantastic. Any others?
I always felt like it was part of building a network. I've been working on the same beat in politics for a long time up here in Syracuse. And once you call somebody once, they're always much more likely to call you back a second time and a third time. So I guess just building the positive relationship with someone that you can call them for information later, even down weeks and months down the road.
Nice. Okay. Any others out there? Okay, then I'm going to dive in. So here's the rules, guys. Nothing is out of bounds with me. Nothing is off base. If you have a question, if I'm missing the mark, if you're not sure, I'm cool. Unmute, ask the question, okay? And we'll go from there. And Gene, do you want to drive or do you want me to drive on the deck?
I'll drive for you. Just say
Okay.
next and I'll drive for you.
Perfect. And I did some as build, so apologies in advance for that. Also, I'll warn you guys, I'm working from my daughter's house today because I have some stuff going on at mine. So if two giant dogs run through the background, I'm sorry, they'll be loud.
No worries.
So one of the things salespeople deal with a lot is call reluctance. It seems obvious, but call anxiety is a real thing. Everybody has it. Everybody has their own form of it. And I will tell you, you're not unique. It comes and goes during people's careers. And there are times where even myself, there are certain calls that I put off making. So I really did some self-assessment here. Frankly, I went and talked to some people that had worked for some of the national networks for a while about what they had done in preparing for this, so I could bring you a little different perspective. And some of the individuals I spoke with had been producers at BBC World and other places like that. So I'm going to try and share from my view what I learned from them and incorporate it. If I use terms that are business terms and they're not journalism and media terms, stop me, have me explain it. No offense taken. So Gene, if you go ahead and click through. The first thing is, and we kind of hit on this, is the expectation when you reach out to somebody of what you're going to get. And if you could click one more here, right? Everybody, and Gene referenced it, you expect that gruff experience on the other side. And you know what the truth is? Part of the time you get that, but a lot of times there's actually a kitten on the other end. And I say this in a humorous light, but so often the fear we build up in ourselves and the concerns we have and the scenarios we make up in our mind are far worse. We turn them into big, terrifying predators, not somebody who wants scratches behind the ears and treats, right? And I'm not saying that the people you interview, that's what they want, but in a lot of ways, one of the things, and Ryan, to your point, even as a student journalist, you have a platform. You can drive and control a narrative. And most people, and I'll use myself as experience, I spent 20 years courting my traditional industry, which is technologies press. I made myself super available, and I went out of my way to have those relationships. So often I gave freely, because when I needed to get a message out, I built that relationship and I could kind of say, hey guys, we're launching this new thing. I don't have $500,000 to drop into a budget. Can I get to a couple of your writers and just get a spotlight piece? And sometimes it worked and fit, and sometimes it didn't. But that's a trade-off, I think, to your point on building a network that you're going to find. So, and Gene, if you kind of click ahead. And what stops us is anxiety, fear, and uncertainty. And I'm actually going to tell the story of my youngest daughter, who's teaching assistant at the graduate level at Western Michigan right now. She had been a performer. She'd studied Shakespeare and performed, pretty reasonably at a pretty high level there in our local market. And then one day she was just afraid to walk on stage. And it happens to all of us. We start building up, like we talked about the lion, we start building up these anxieties. What if the people aren't nice? What if they don't take me seriously? What if I'm going to ask them uncomfortable questions? And by the way, salespeople and business people struggle with this. This morning, I spent 2 hours with the CEO of a tech startup who has never been told no, right? And the truth is, sometimes you have to tell people no. Sometimes you have to say things that are unpopular or deliver on a message in a way that, isn't necessarily flattering. If you do it professionally and respectfully, you can maintain that contact. People pay me a lot of money to give them bad news. I'm not the guy anybody ever hires because things are perfect. I'm the guy people come to when things are broken, right? So in a way, think about it when you're trying to get a story, when you're trying to get an official, when you're trying to get somebody to get an angle on something. You're trying to get that out. You're trying to share a viewpoint. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's theirs, maybe it's impartial and it's comparison and it's point and counterpoint. Be transparent with that. We'll talk a little more about that on the plan. So Gene, if you could click ahead again, please. And you know, it's a desert. I love the desert picture, right? Causes of call reluctance. You feel like you're alone. You're out there, the sun's hot, nobody's with you, and you're out of water. So ring a bell. Anybody that rings a bell, wave a hand, give me a thumbs up. So we're going to talk about what causes it, give you a couple quick tips. And what I really want to do here is, after today, if this has been beneficial, obviously you'll probably have access to the recording and the slides. I'll put together a call reluctance guide for you guys specifically and send it out to Gene, and he can share it with everyone in the program. Okay. So with that, go ahead and click ahead. The first thing we hit is the what ifs. What if I don't know all the answers? Okay. I'm going to give you a comparison here. What if I went to the doctor and they found out that I needed shoulder surgery and I went to my general practitioner? Does that make my doctor less of a good doctor? No, absolutely not. It means they had to go get a specialist. So what if you get into a politician and they have an issue that is energy related or some hot trigger related? You probably have resources you can go to, right? Be transparent, represent what you know, and then go pull on your network and your resources and your peers and have the conversation about, hey, I'm having this, I'm not sure where to turn next. You don't have to have all the answers. What you actually have to have, and this is great in your position, is the questions. You can go do the research after the fact. And I'll give you a business analogy. I watch salespeople who make $500,000, $750,000 a year ask really good questions. And I had a guy named Elliot Long with me for years that was my brain. Elliot was the technical genius. He could do things I could never imagine. I asked the questions, I got the answers. Elliot heard the answers differently, and we went and found the solution. Take the same approach, whether it's a world leader or somebody on a city council or student government. Ask the questions you want the answer to, then do the research and go after. And Gene, if you click again, please. What if they say no or aren't interested? To the point that Ryan made in the opening, don't worry about that. So in sales, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, it's called the rule of sevens. It takes 7 contacts for somebody to actually consider buying your solution. Okay, it's almost a universal law. So if I connect with somebody on LinkedIn until I have 5 to 7 interactions, they're just a name. If I'm dealing with a customer and do 5 to 7 calls, you know, even if they've signed a contract, they really don't understand me yet, and I don't understand them yet. And maybe we haven't even had a conversation. And Gene, if you click again ahead, you know, what if they're me? Look, this is a story about when I was young. There was a guy named Joe Margolis, and he was from Brooklyn, New York. And I started out in the telecom business. And what happened when I got about 3-4 months in and thought I was good is my boss had me call Joe. And it was a setup. He knew it from the word go. Joe was the worst phone call you could ever make. He asked for things that I didn't know didn't exist. He ran me through the ringer, and I loved the man to death because I did it with all my newbies for the next 5 years. The reason being is, after doing that with Joe and realizing it was good natured and not a bad experience, really bad calls didn't matter. So they're going to happen. You're going to catch people on a bad day. You're going to catch people that are gruff on an issue or an item. It's okay. Be consistent. And you know, I'm not telling you to lose the authentic you. You don't ever want to lose that, right? Don't sell that out. Don't give that up. But you do have to have, your skin needs to be a little bit concrete, right? You might not be bulletproof. You might get some scrapes and scruffs, but it's okay. It's not you, it's them at that time, and you have to learn to accept that and separate it. So, and one more if you would. And what if they don't get back to me? To the point of the rule of sevens, people have their own priorities, they have their own agendas, right? In business and salespeople, when I look at people that are underperforming, one of the lead reasons is they have a conversation and they don't follow up. Literally, my premium coaching business this year is planning, follow up, and follow through. We build a business plan, they're going to work the plan. They're going to follow up on the people that they identified in the plan, just like you'd follow up on a lead source or story. And then they're going to follow through on continuing to contact them, looking to get the conversation, looking to drive what they're trying to drive there. And by the way, if at any point in sales something's not a fit, it's okay to say it's not a fit and refer them to somebody else. I don't know about your industry in journalism, but if you get there and they're not the right person for you, that's okay. Admit that. If there's someone else you can connect them with that the story makes more sense for, I would think you're doing somebody a favor and doing a professional courtesy. And Gene, is that accurate? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I have the not to go too far afield, but the very first news director job I ever interviewed for, I got to the location and I interviewed and I was super excited because it was my first news director interview. And as the day progressed, I started to realize I'm not the guy for this job. And I'm at dinner and I'm getting more nervous and more nervous. And the general manager then offers me the job. And then I had to say, I'm flattered. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to come in here and get to know more about your operation, but I don't think I'm the person for this position. And then I explain, and here's why. Bullet, bullet, bullet. You know, could I come here and could I achieve some things for you? Yes, but I don't think I'm what you need right now, but I do know some people. And so I referred 3 names to him and he wound up hiring one of those people. And I thought I had completely torched my chances and my reputation. And 2 weeks later, I got a call from another general manager who said, Jack called me and told me I should hire you. And if I didn't, I was dumb. So he actually referred me to the job. That was my first news director job. So I think your point about being authentic to who you are and transparent is very, very on the mark.
Yeah, and that's a great example, right? What you do today may pay off 3 months later. It may pay off 10 years later. Some of my best clients were people that said no to me years ago, right? And some of my closest relationships are people that said no to me a million times, personally and professionally. So, all right, if you could do me a favor and click ahead. Here's one of the areas people fall down. It's a list of excuses. And I use the analogy of getting lost in your own maze. So if you can click, getting ready to get ready. I don't know enough. I need 3 more good questions. I need more information. I need to read the 3 last tweets. What are the last 3 quotes they gave? Whatever it is, right? Until you start the conversation, the truth is you have an idea of where it's going, but you don't know. You get stuck in your own echo chamber. Don't let that stop you. Right? People hide behind this. I watch really great people hide behind email, text, and DMs. Social media, whatever, WhatsApp, pick your medium. People are hiding behind it. Yes, it's a great way for a quick answer. It's a great way to re-engage some people, but they lose the inflection. Now, you guys are probably way better with the written word than I could ever hope to be. But the truth is, voice inflection, how you deliver it, even in a conversation with a request, is read and heard very differently. So think about an email you got that maybe irritated you, that frustrated you, yet if you had that same conversation, you'd have understood it differently. So don't just hide behind it. It's a great way to follow up. It's a great way to do things. You're not going to close, right? Websites are optimized to do that. That's a consumer transaction. It is not that kind of relationship. The other thing is the safe call. This isn't I got home from my date okay, by the way, right? Those are good too. But this is, hey, this guy's friendly to me. So instead of reaching out to somebody who's really going to do or drive my story, my own understanding, my insights, what my readers or listeners get from it, you call somebody who's just okay. You got to go after the right people. In sales, we use the analogy, if you're not selling to the C-suite, the CEO, the chief financial officer, and you're asking for big money, you ask how the previous version went. So if somebody can sign off on something that's a couple $100,000 and you're selling something for $100,000, maybe you're okay. But if you're trying to sell something that's $100 million, and there are people that do that every day, odds are you need people with the signatory authority there. In this case, you need the expert. You need the person that's going to lend the most to what you're trying to accomplish. And by the way, in the beginning, it'll be hard to get there and it'll be uncomfortable to have those conversations. but it'll be second nature. Someday you're going to wake up and you're going to be 51 years old like me, and you're going to realize everybody you know is senior level and you've spent your career building the right contacts. So, and also do follow people up the chain, right? If you're upfront, honest, transparent, and consistent with them, you can follow them as they rise and maybe even a little as they fall, and stay there and build those relationships that last decades. And then the perfect time. You know, if they tell you to call at 8 o'clock, and I'll use Gene and I as an example, right? We chase calendars to set this up a little bit. We said, okay, 10:30 this day. Perfect. We had the perfect time. But if you aren't in a place to ask for a specific time, there is no perfect time better than now. Right? Make the contact, leave the message. Because remember, odds are it's going to take 5 or 6 more calls to even get to them, 5 or 6 more messages to get to them. Don't wait. Oh, wait, you know, it's an even day on an odd month and the moon is full. Oh, it's not full for 3 more days. I'll wait. Salespeople do this all the time. They lie to themselves. The difference between the guy with the Ferrari and the person driving the 1991 Honda is that. Don't chase perfection. And then fake fire drills. People make up things. Oh, this so-and-so needs this for this other story or other event. If it's real, deal with it. But don't create emergencies to avoid the calling. Make the time. I'm a schedule guy. I do all my creative between 5 and 7 a.m. in the morning. After 7 a.m., I'm on customer calls or whatever presentations. Then I do all my other stuff late afternoon. It's sort of task oriented. That's how I work. You'll have to flex a little bit with the people you're trying to reach. But if I have a customer who wants to talk to me at 6 a.m. because I deal with the UK, that's great. I adapt. But don't create things to avoid that original outreach, to avoid that follow-up or asking the question. All right. What do you do? If I ask you, what do you actually do? Tell me.
Anybody, as a student journalist, what do you do?
Even as a journalist, take yourself beyond where you are today.
True.
So my perception is you put things into focus. Okay. You take a big wide world that's blurry at a distance, and you take your skills and your talents and your expertise and you bring it into focus for more people. Don't ever underestimate that. You know, as a student journalist, that's where you are today. That's not going to be where you are forever. So you're doing that in a different way, and it'll grow and change and evolve. But to the average guy out there who, you know, reads his news online now because papers are hard to come by except for Sunday, right? Who consumes things on a tablet, I count on people like you to bring me different perspectives and put things into focus. Don't underestimate your importance and your credibility even now. Okay. I practice yoga. My joke is I'm pre-pandemic, I was the short, fat guy at yoga class. Okay. And one of the things is my saying was always too much is never enough, right? Drive more, drive more, drive more, drive more. And what I learned by going to yoga is they use the phrase, it's a practice, not perfection. No call you make, no outreach you make will ever be perfect. It can always be a little bit better. It's not a reason not to do it, right? So for those of you that don't know yoga, right, this pose would pull me down on my nose. And the reason I used it instead of something more elegant is I have fallen out of the seemingly basic pose and almost taken out people on my right and my left for 5 years now. It's just like a bad call. If you flub a message, you stutter on a word, you know, you don't think you deliver it clearly and concisely, so what? Do it again. It's fine. Nobody else remembers. You're making it more, just like the line in the beginning, you're making it into more than it probably really is. So part of it is, and this is really what I hope to deliver to you guys in the next week or so, is have a plan, right? Have a plan for the call. It doesn't need to be sophisticated. It just needs to be what you want to accomplish. So if we can just click ahead. What do you need? What do you need from the person you're reaching out to? Simple terms. One of my clients is a Cornell educated lawyer. She's got multiple doctorates, an MBA, has a marketing background, and she writes everything like it's a contract. The big fight we have with her is she doesn't use the language her customers use. Use the language that your readers will understand that is still true and authentic, right? Or your viewers or your listeners, and get the point across that you need to, but keep it simple. There's a old phrase in sales, keep it simple, stupid, right? I don't know if it plays in media as well, but the simpler you can tell it, the more concise you can tell it, the better. Right? When you're reaching out to somebody, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, but you need to be able to articulate your benefits. Why? Why are you reaching out, right? Why are you reaching out to them, right? Honestly, flattery works sometimes. Honesty almost always works, right? It's a little more difficult. And then you've got to expect the person on the other side, what's in it for me, right? You know, the analogy is, we call it whiff 'em. If you ever hear somebody say, oh, what's the whiff 'em? That's what's in it for the person you're talking to. Is it their chance to tell their story? Is it their chance to get recognition? Because remember, most people don't have access to journalists. Most people don't have access to media. It's a pay to play game at best. If you're reaching out and you're not selling, you've got an advantage. Don't underestimate it. In scripting versus bullet points, and I will leave this up to you individually. Some people will write an entire script, okay? Hi, I'm Tim. I'm reaching out to you about what's going on with the campus food situation and the local city council meeting where they're trying to pass blah, blah, blah ordinance. Or I might just simply have who I'm calling, what their title is, why I need, and the 3 things I want to get from them, okay? You do it in a way that works for you. There's no right way in my mind. There's no wrong way. It's the way that is most effective for you. And practice. It's okay, right? Do it in front of a mirror, do it however you've been trained professionally, but don't make it sound dry. Think of the bad telemarketer that calls you, right? They've got a pitch, give me your credit card number, buy my insurance, buy my financial products, get whatever, lose 1 million pounds in 30 days, get rich in 3 hours. They're all too perfect. They're all too slick. That's part of the authenticity. Know your stuff. Rely on yourself, believe in yourself, practice it, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, rinse and repeat. Shampoo reference, right? What do they tell you to do? It sells more shampoo. Give you a hint. In business, it gets you more customers. Right? In your case, from what I learned, what do you need? You need to have contact. Okay, consistent contact. One of the best things you can do is, even when you don't need something, share something of value to the person you've got in your network, right? If you've talked to them once, if you've talked to them, put them on a rotation. Again, I'm not an automate everything guy. I send things that work. So what I might send to Gene is something that I've come across in my own things that, hey, I know we talked about this, thought this might be good for your group, right? Somebody else will be totally different. Commitment. You need a commitment from them in terms of time, in terms of when and where and how, but they need a commitment from you that they're going to be able to trust you in an ongoing manner as well, right? Confirmation. Don't underestimate that people will put things on their schedules wrong. Remind them politely, triple check them, right? Don't give them an option to back out, but make sure that they understand, hey, we're meeting here at noon, correct? Okay, here's what I've got. By the way, I've got your bio, I've got your headshot, whatever it is you should have in advance. You know, re-acknowledge that. Looking forward to seeing you. Close it out on a positive note. Those can be text messages. Those can be emails. Those can be things like that. I host a podcast. I use 3 reminders for people that schedule on a podcast that aren't my referrals from my own network. One is an email day before, one is an email 8 hours before, and a text message 2 hours before. That way, if they're going to blow me out, I know, and I can go back to something else that's billable. Create your own cadence. And literally that's the only thing I automate, by the way, right? And then completion. Follow up when it's done. Send a thank you note. It sounds really simple. Send a thank you note, right? Send something after the fact. It does not of monetary value, right? Just simple appreciation. People will remember that. And if you can, sometimes do something different. The things that sit normally behind me on my bookcase are things that people sent me. Handwritten notes. I get a lot of emails, but handwritten notes from somebody, right? Referral pieces, things like that. Just so you know, we got tornado sirens. There's no tornadoes. Just ignore them if you can hear them. So follow it through to completion. Make sure that you close out with the person, because that's really just opening the door for the next time, the next conversation, the next referral. So some best practices to use for yourself. First of all, work your plan. I used weights because if you think about it, anytime you do something, you build up. Weights are a great example of resistance. When you first start reaching out to people, they're going to resist. It's harder when you're newer. I can call people today as someone who's been doing it forever and get conversations that 20 years ago I would have never dreamt of. It's because I've built the reputation. So those first ones are the hardest. One of the things they tell business people is if you can survive the first year, it starts to turn, right? Think of it the same way. You spend that first year, you're laying the foundation for a building, for a house. You build a solid foundation over the first 5 years of your career. The rest of it, you start to add the upgrades and the features and the stories because you've done the right thing in the beginning. Have a plan, work the plan, expect resistance, and just keep pushing through. We talked about following through to commitment, follow up, follow through. Can't stress it enough. This is where people miss the boat. Whether it's getting that initial conversation. I called them twice. And I sent them a text. Nobody got back to me. Hit them again, change the wording, change the angle. The outcome and desires can be the same. Keep chasing, right? We talked about the rule of 7 earlier. 7 contacts. Until you've touched somebody 7 times, you don't really have them. They don't know you. They don't get you. They might say yes, but if they say yes after 3, get those 4 other touches in for when you need them next time, right? But odds are it's going to take 7 times to get them to open up. We talked about building your network. Don't be afraid to build your network. So if you're trying to get to someone and you know that someone in your network is close to them and you've built a good relationship, ask for their support. Hey, I'm trying to meet Gene. Ryan, can you introduce me? Here's what I want. And just be right up front, right? If they're in the same organization, ask somebody to sponsor the meeting or the conversation. And don't be afraid. So people get caught up on references. Your own work is a great reference. Hey, I know you don't know me. Here's some things I've done. Here's some articles to read. Here's some vlogs I've put out. Here's some things I've done. By the way, here's my CV or whatever if you want to get more technical, but you get a feel for who I am. And if you have source references and other things like that are included in those, all the better, right? Because you can say, look, here's somebody I talked to on this issue, and here's how the piece turned out. Just, again, don't be afraid. A little self-promotion isn't bad. You don't have to be a charlatan. You can just simply say that, look, this is what I've done. This is what I'm good at. By the way, this is where I'm going. If you don't tell people where you're trying to get, they're not going to guess. They're going to see things from their own perception and their own lens, right? They don't understand what you're trying to bring into focus. I got this from Paula Pace. She was my presentations trainer when I was early in my career. She said, never lose the butterflies. I've spoken to groups of 5 and 6, and I've spoken to groups of several thousands and larger. If you're perfectly calm, if you're not having just a touch of that anxiety, a little bit of butterflies, you've lost your edge. You need to self-examine. Those are the things that make you different. You're not reading a script. You're not being boring. right? You're driving something that matters and is important to you. A little bit of nervousness, a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety, push through it. So with that, outcomes. Does anybody see a way to get their follow-ups? Does this help? Just be honest. Did I miss the mark? Did I hit the mark?
Yeah, feel free to unmute. Anna, I saw you shaking your head, yes.
So what could I have done better for you?
Yara?
I think that was actually a great approach because whenever I have call reluctance, I notice that it has to do with my approach and afraid of the way that I word it, if it's going to be all right. And then I get too much inside my head. So everything that you pointed out in the beginning really did help to me kind of like, no, it's all in your head. It's not this big line. It's more of this little kitty cat and you'll be fine. So I really helped that.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Veronza, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, I agree with Yara because I think this helped me a lot because from my perspective, like I suffer from like anxiety. So like journalism and like this whole thing, like I've learned you have to be authentic and I try to be professional and authentic at the same time. And I agree with Yara, like I get inside my head sometimes like, oh, what, like, am I asking the right questions? Like are people like are gonna, see from my point of view what I'm trying to give out. And so I thank you for this lesson because I think we try to be authentic as much as we can, but we get caught up in the whole like headspace, like, am I doing the right thing? And, trying to be ourselves and not trying to be somebody else. But yeah, this really helped me a lot. So thank you.
Yeah. Good. What would help you more? Was there a point or something you struggle with that maybe I didn't cover that we could work through?
I think you covered all of it for me. Like the main thing is like for me is like being authentic and like chasing after like what you are trying to bring out. And so because I sometimes I suffer being hesitant sometimes and like trying to be like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Yeah. But I have trouble with getting inside my head. So that really helped me. You did a good job. So I thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad it helped.
Anna, you raising your hand?
Oh, yeah, I had something.
Go ahead.
I want to say this is really great, and I feel like it relates to me in this moment. So I have a question for you. There is a story that I really want to do here in Italy on this big corporation. I've sent many emails, called, nothing else, like no follow-ups from them. And do you suggest I just go into their corporation and just see what happens, or do you think I should just keep calling?
So who are you calling?
There's a foundation here called Andrea Bocelli Foundation. They're a nonprofit that I want to do a story on.
Okay.
And I'm calling their main office.
Okay. Do you have an individual's name or title that you're going after?
Yes. So there is, I've been sending an email to Veronica, who's the president of the company.
Okay. So if this was a sales situation, I'd look for 3 other ways in, right? It may or may not work for you. Depending on the angle of what you're trying to accomplish, if they have an outreach or a press relations group, right? That's often a way I would look to go in. So in my world, normally I call the CEO, right? And if they know me, that's great. If they don't, sometimes it's a little tougher. So then I solve sales problems in my day job, right? What I do is I'm kind of a sniper. Everybody teaches sales training. I'm the guy that, what's the 3 deals you need to either grow your business or not go out of business? And that's why people hire me, okay? Get your product to market or close big deals. So I find who's running that. So in my case, I would go after the head of sales and maybe their 2 or 3 lieutenants. And if there was an economic benefit or a product benefit, I would go after the product people. So in a not-for-profit, do they have different people that are doing their fundraising, right? And is there a way in through there would be my thought. And by the way, it might be a director level, right? The other thing you can look at, if you have access to somebody who sits on their foundation board or one of their committees, start the conversation there and explain where you're trying to go. You might not always end up at the president right away, but you might be able to get what you need from another part.
Yeah, thank you. That helps.
Yeah. The other thing is if they're helping other entities, get those entities to sponsor you in if you have a way.
Any other needs or thoughts from anyone else? Anybody working on your stories for this week or next week and having a hard time getting a source to commit to you, or you need an idea on how to maybe turn that conversation positively to get that that source for the story? Yara?
It doesn't have to do with one that I'm currently working on, but last week I had to do for my student newscast. I like strive for the perfection, like how you said. I even sent out a confirmation email letting them know, reminding them of the date and the time that we had scheduled the interview for. And I get there, and then the subject who I was meant to interview didn't show up. They ended up having, I think, to take like a family relative to like the airport. And I've noticed that in this industry, you're always going to be thrown like these curveballs, and you just kind of have to like persevere and then just like reroute and like still continue to do what you were meant to be there for. So I managed to get an interview with the coach at the gym, and it ended up turning out good, and we were able to reschedule and get the subject that I did want. But it really just goes to show like what you were saying was true. I mean, you can't always strive for perfection. It's not always going to be there, but as long as you get to what you wanted to do and your main goal, then you kind of get to like breathe and be like, okay, it turned out good.
Yeah, and you can always build on where you started, right? You can look to improve it. You can look to refine it the next time that comes around and you want to work it when you're not under the gun.
I try to stress with a lot of the young reporters coming in, Tim, that when they first get here, we do give them a couple of weeks to get around town and meet people and introduce themselves. And so there's no pressure on them to actually produce something that day. So you can get in your first 2 or 3 of those 7 contacts before you ever have to be transactional. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about the value and the understanding of probably those first 3 or 4 times you may not get, that person to go on camera, but it's important to put in those reps because it softens the beach or it warms them up for you.
Yeah. So think of it, people often in business use the analogy. The people who think the highest of you at a party or a social gathering, right, is the person you listen to the most, you share the least with. At the end of the day, we get paid to ask questions, right? Start with asking questions, right? Don't go in with an agenda. And by the way, one of the things we teach salespeople early on is qualify people in or qualify people out. This person's going to be a good fit for me today or down the road, or frankly, they're not. And as you ask more and more questions and do this more and more, sometimes you'll learn to set people aside. Salespeople have a fault, even the great ones, where they believe that everybody's going to buy from them, that they're going to win every deal, right? You can't believe everybody's going to give you the story or not on your timeline. So to Gene's point, make those contacts, start to kind of ferret people out. Who's going to be accommodating? Who's going to be that quick pivot if you ever get in a bind on something? Know who you can turn to. It doesn't have to be a safe call, doesn't have to be routine. It can be somebody you have a relationship with, right? And to that point, keep asking the questions. Know about them. Know what they drive, right? One of the things we work with people on is what people say and what they mean are 2 different things. Okay, often because we hear it differently. And I'll use a business scenario, but please apply it in a way that works for you. If I'm calling on somebody and say, I care most about the price, the cost of this thing. That seems really simple, right? On the surface, is it $2 or is it $2 million? But behind that statement of cost in the business world, is it the price to buy it? Is the price to keep using it and maintaining it? What's the cost of change? What's the cost of supply? There's 20 different elements that go in there. So when you're speaking to somebody about cost, right, ask the questions. When you're speaking to somebody about what they have to offer or what you're trying to do, drive and get to their perception of what that answer means, because then you can leverage it better. Other things you're working on that maybe I can help with?
What about this technique or tool? I'm not even sure how to describe it. Of you meet the person, and there's almost an assumptive nature to the way you steer the dialogue, which is, hey, I know we're going to be working together, and we're going to be interacting, and you're going to be providing me with information. And then you then turn over some degree of control to them and say, how best do I deal with you to gather that information? Help me to understand. Do you prefer, text, emails? Which number should I best call you at? In other words, you give them, you just assume we're going to be doing this stories together as we go forward in this relationship. So how best do we conduct business together? Is that, I don't even know what the term is for that, but is that something that is, is there some value there?
Important, right? And it's meeting them where they're comfortable. You're right. So on that one, if you think about it, I'll use myself as an example. I tell clients, if you need me, text me or WhatsApp me, then call me, and then email me. If it's not the end of the world, I'm not going to see your email unless it's 5 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock in the morning. Just don't look. My work style is that. So if you send me something I need to look at in email, that's cool. Send me a text and tell me, hey, Tim, go look at your email. Same with the people you're working with. Ask them how they prefer to be communicated with. Hey, I know we're going to be talking, kind of regularly, and I'm going to work with you a bunch. What's the best way to get a hold of you? What's the best way to check in? What do you do? What do you like? Right? Some people say, call my assistant. Okay, cool. Some people after a time will say, yeah, next time you need me, just text me or message me or whatever. And it'll evolve, but get it from them. Begin where they want to meet you, and make sure it's in a way that works for you over time. Remember, you have the power. You have the megaphone. You need them. You want to respect them. But at the end of the day, you're giving them a voice beyond who they can just yell to themselves or have on their own social media channels.
Here are the rest of those bullets. I don't know if you wanted to talk about those.
Sure.
Oop.
So we talked a lot about being authentic. And normally on Tuesdays, I'm in a white shirt and a bow tie, right? I play a nerd because I am, right? At the end of the day, I'm a geek. For years, I tried to be something I wasn't. I'm not your classic type A sales guy. I'm a nerd. I'm successful because I'm good with numbers, period. Right? Find what you're good at and make it yours and brand it as your own. Be authentic. Don't try to be somebody you're not, right? Use your own style. Sure, there's best practices. Sure, there's professional standards. But in your conversation style, speak how you speak, write how you write, interact how you interact. Don't just adapt to be something you're not. People will see it as inauthentic, right? People will also not relate to you in the same way, not just on the side that you're talking to, but on the side that's consuming your information and your stories, right? Look to grow every single time, right? I literally ask you guys, what can I do better? You're not my audience. Next time I do this, I hope I deliver. I'm glad it was good today. I hope next time it's better, and I'm going to take everything you said and adapt it. And the truth is, I'm going to take this and some of what I did here and give it to my customers for their non-salespeople, because I've been able to learn from you guys. So there's value everywhere and take advantage of that growth. And we talked about the concrete skin, right? I listen to metal. I'm sorry, I do. Right. And there's a band called Shinedown, and there's a line in one of their songs about concrete street skin. You have to have it. You have to some degree realize that what you're doing, no matter how invested you are, isn't really you. The person you are away from that, the fat guy that falls over in yoga is not the guy that does $100 million deals. We're the same person, but they're different parts of us. So the people that say no to me in my day job and the people who don't mind that I bump into them know the same guy in different ways. And so you have to have a little bit of a wall there. So, and this I actually took, and to talk about being nervous and how it all goes back, I took this over Lake Michigan about 10 days ago. I used to fly 200 times a year. Prior to the pandemic, I'd spent more than 20% of my life in a Marriott branded hotel alone. Okay. Not all the other ones. I was going for decades all over the world. I didn't fly for over a year. So I went from 25 years of flying and traveling to getting on a plane to fly to Kalamazoo to visit my daughter. I was nervous. I was a wreck. Flying never, ever bothered me. It happens to everybody. This is a view of Lake Michigan with the ice breaking up as the weather shifted and changes. You've got to break. Things that felt good are going to feel weird sometimes. It's okay. It's normal. And it happens to me. It'll happen to all of us. It's how you adapt to it and what you do next and what you take from it that's important.
Great advice, Tim. Tim, I ask a question of our guest speakers, and if you don't mind, indulge me on this. And Jared actually brought it up during our first guest speaker, and so Jared, I'm going to use your question again if you don't mind. His question was, what are the one or two things that, looking back now, you wish you could tell your younger self on the eve of coming out of school and beginning your journey in your profession?
Don't make somebody else their fortune without making your own. So I've made several men very, very wealthy, and I've made good money, don't get me wrong, but I've made them tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So advocate for yourself earlier. Don't wait for somebody to do the right thing, and advocate for you in your career, in your next step, in anything. The second thing is, it's okay to ask for what you want. Whether it's your next job, it's your next interview, it's okay. If you can't articulate what you want and you think people are just going to know that that's what you desire, you'll never get it. You'll be infinitely unhappy. I was 28 years old running an $80 million a year P&L with about 50 employees. You know why I jumped everybody else? I showed up early, I stayed late, and I told the boss I wanted the job, and I did the work to get it. Don't be afraid to ask. And probably the third thing is, don't wait until you're old to realize who you are. Right? If you have a passion, follow it. If your passion is a subset of your industry, do what you have to do, but also pursue that. Don't set everything aside. So,
wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
Any other questions for Tim? We got about 6 minutes left on the clock here, so I want to be respectful of his time. Anybody else thinking? Does that spark anything in anybody else that you want to get in before we let Tim go? I do have a weekly reading recommendation that I share with everybody, Tim, and this is specifically to the points you made today. But the recommendation I'm making today is a book on Stoic philosophy, The Art of Living, the classic manual on virtue, happiness, and effectiveness. Epictetus is this famous, I guess, the father of Stoicism, and Sharon Liebel has modernized some of the concepts in that. But I have found, maybe too late in life, or much later in life than I wish, that I would have gotten a hold of these concepts and Stoic philosophy earlier in my life. And it's not everything, but at the heart of it is some of the things you've touched on in your presentation, which is, be authentic to who you are and be less concerned with what the other person thinks about you, and be more concerned about what you know to be true. Because in the words of, to paraphrase the Stoics, the problem is not what someone else says about you. The problem is the power you give to them to let that saying affect how you feel and act. So it's it's not what is done to you, it's what you allow that to do to your actions going forward and your feelings going forward. So this is a small book. It's you can probably fit it in your pocket, but there are short little pithy things, and you can read through these sayings. And I have a whiteboard on the outside of my door of my office, and I write one of the sayings on there every week or so to share it with staff, and it just makes you think. So it's empowering, and I've had several members of staff buy this book, read this book, and then have a fresh take on things, and realize that it's all in your power. You can take control of that dialogue and those feelings. And it's sometimes, not always, but sometimes happiness is really a decision. It's up to you whether you decide to let something affect you or not affect you. So that's my share today, everybody, for today's recommended read. Well, Tim, this has been illuminating. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If I can do anything to return the favor, if there's anything that our profession you're hazy on or cloudy on in terms of our profession, I can illuminate that, I'd be more than glad to do it. Guys, you have all of Tim's contact information for his website, and I would encourage you to follow up on that and make contact with him, because although his expertise is traditionally in his career in sales, you can see there are lots of incredibly valuable takeaways he shared with us today that have direct application to our industry and will help you. And I think there's a real kernel of something special here, because I have never invited someone like you, Tim, into a conversation like this to share these techniques with young journalists. And yet, year after year, as I bring new journalists in, I see them confronting some of the same things. And there are a lot of incredibly valuable points that you made today that I know will help the folks on this call, and I will share them with our staff here as well. So thanks again for spending time with us today.
It's been a pleasure. I'm glad I could help some.
Beautiful. We have a few housekeeping issues to tackle about assignments, but Tim, thanks again for your time. Be blessed and stay in touch, brother.
I will. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you so much.